Hey fellow thrill seekers, today we're diving deep into one of the most profound and challenging stories in the Bible. The test of faith endured by Abraham when he received the divine command to sacrifice his beloved son Isaac. Picture this, you're going about your daily life and then suddenly out of nowhere, God himself appears before you, presenting you with a request. He asks you to sacrifice your own flesh and blood, your cherished child. That wouldn't be easy for anyone, and today we're looking at that brand new film from 2023 that tells his story, his only son. This film digs deep into the story of Abraham, a story of faith, of love, a near-death experience, but will his only son stick to the script and give us an authentically biblical experience? Or will it take some liberties on the Bible story? Well, it's time to find out. Let's get right into it. The film begins 2,000 years before Christ in the book of Genesis, chapter 22, verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain. I will show you." The story of Abraham and Isaac poses profound questions about faith, obedience, and the unimaginable sacrifices that some believers have faced throughout history. It challenges us to ponder the depths of our own faith and what we would be willing to do if we were faced with a similar test. Verse 3, early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place that God had told him about. Now, the story of Abraham and Isaac actually takes place over the course of only 19 short verses. And to add dramatics to the story and add substance, they definitely added some new characters. As they walk, they come across men on horseback. These characters are definitely not in the Bible at all, but they are shown throughout the film multiple times. The horsemen wanted to take some of their belongings until they learned that this was actually Abraham. And it turns out that their king really likes Abraham. So they backed off and moved on. I'm gonna say it right now, I think that these characters are strictly filler and they're just added for dramatic effect. I do not think that they are necessary to the film, and to be honest, I kinda wish that they weren't in the movie at all. I don't really like the whole story that they're involved in. That night, the men sit around a fire as Abraham tells them the story of when kings of Shinar wanted to fight kings of Sodom, Gomorrah, and some of the other neighboring cities. Now, to me, this is a story that I would have loved this film to have explored more. The story comes from Genesis 14. It's about some kings who go to war with each other, and one of these kings is very powerful. As a result, he takes many people captive, including Lot. Lot is Abraham's nephew, and when Abraham hears that Lot has been captured, he doesn't waste any time. He gathers up himself a small army. His men chase after the king and his forces, and in a surprising turn of events, Abraham's army is actually successful in defeating the king and his allies. They then mention the story of how Sodom was burned and many died. This story comes from Genesis 18 and 19. And this would have been such a great addition to the story that I really wish that they would have shown in a flashback and just explored it a little more. It could have added some really epic visuals to the film, but instead they just show the men talking about it around the fire. No cool shots, no fights or anything. Angel Studios, way to show you had a small budget. You really showed it. As they journey on, they come across a fatally hurt man whose daughter was kidnapped. And Abraham thinks that it was the horseman from earlier. And then we get another flashback. This one's from Genesis 15. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. "Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward." But Abram said, "Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir?" Then the word of the Lord came to him. "This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood. That will be your heir." He took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them," then he said to him, "so shall your offspring be." Now it's at this point that things start to get real here, as he goes to tell Sarai what had happened. Genesis 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go and sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai had said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan for 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." So she tells him to sleep with Hagar, and then she gets mad at him for doing exactly what he was told. Man, the Bible warns us right here. If your girl tells you to sleep with someone else, it's a trap. Don't do it. You have been warned. So the night before they reach Moriah, we see Abraham praying for his son's life, for God to take his life instead. This prayer is so heart-wrenching, and I'm quite certain something like this probably did happen, but it's not written in Genesis. And to me, it's actually kind of nice seeing the other possibilities of what may have happened during this journey. The temptations that the men may have had on the way.
I have beauties for all your tastes. Come!
The people that they may have run into, the conversations that they might have had. This gives a deeper look into what might have actually happened. However, we can only speculate it as it's not written, so it's ultimately up to you to decide if you like that or not. Subtle conversations or actions make sense to add to the film, but this next scene is not subtle. It's taking and adding dramatic effect to a whole new level. Eshkolam, a slave helping on the journey, questions Abraham about why they must travel these 3 days just for a sacrifice. And over throughout the film, Abraham basically says that it's not his place to ask why God asks us to do these things. And the slave doesn't buy anything he's saying, as he knows that Abraham is hiding something and he wants to know the truth. So Abraham and him get into a tussle, and Abraham knocks him down with his staff. At this point, the horsemen have returned. And this time they have the kidnapped daughter of the man from earlier. The drama rises even more. Isaac offers to give his life for hers, and this causes a fight that nearly ends Isaac's life. And since there is no verse in the Bible that states that this actually happens, I kind of wanted to think about why the writer may have decided to add this to the film. I think what it does is it shows how good of a person Isaac is, that he's willing to give up his own life for another. It gives a bit of depth to the Isaac character that we don't really get in Genesis. At this point, the men have made it. Their journey is over. They have reached their destination. Genesis 22, verse 4. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servant, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the two of them went together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, "Father." "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and the wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the two of them went on together. When they reached the place that God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son, Isaac, and laid him on the altar. On top of the wood, he then reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on that boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horn. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and you have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore." And the movie ends there. Overall, I think the film did a decent job at following the 19 verses that it had to work with, but it also just added too much, and not in a way that made the story more interesting. But what did you guys think of the film? Would you have changed anything about it? What would you have changed? Let me know in the comments, and if you want to see how biblically accurate The Prince of Egypt is, that video is here. Or if you want to know why I think The Passion of the Christ is a horror film, that video is here. We'll see you guys next time.